session, the fifth particular class of your CA final direct tax. So students, those now I suppose that all of you are already in the WhatsApp group. Module 1 students has already been dispatched. Hopefully all of you would have received it, or if not students, then at least the first particular topic PDF file, please do ask in the group, WhatsApp group, whereby the first particular topic would be shared with all of you. So this is your first particular booklet students. I'll just again put across the contact details of our team for the purpose of this. (97794300334), and second is my number, WhatsApp number itself. So this is the number wherein please do the WhatsApp and ensure that you all are in the WhatsApp group, the group for all the May 21, November 21 regular batch. So students, before now we start the session, a quick particular go through of this particular file. This is the first booklet which I have prepared. In fact, the second booklet also is in press now, so that would also be released, say maybe in a 2 or 3 days time, and that would also be there for dispatch. So now students, herein, if you have a look to this particular area, I'll just go through it quickly, the initial part. So the direct tax law and international taxation new syllabus, 70 and 30 marks. ICAI students, they have released this notification earlier last year itself. They have given this notification wherein they have given the marks bifurcation. The marks bifurcation, which actually gives us a good detail understanding as to what is the allocation of the marks, and on the basis of which the target would be made for the examination. Let's have a look students here. Direct tax law, 70 marks, that's the first one. So in this context, if you see the allocation for 30 marks, we all know it's international taxation, which is the area for 30 marks. 70 marks, let's see what is the content. The first is, which is the most important area, 35 to 45% of your content would be in respect of the computation of total income, and all the heads of income, everything, whatever we have discussed in the last session also, that all the cases would be highlighted in your examination at a much advanced level. Lot of combination, interlinking would be done about the heads of income, and that is what would be the target as far as your 35 to 45% of this 70 marks will be from this particular area. At the same time students, you will have also taxation of various person, wherein company, firm, AOP, BOI, trust taxation, etc. So there is taxation of various entity. Now technically speaking students, for the purpose of this second part, which is your taxation of various entities, this particular part, this require a very good base or a foundation of the total income computation, so that you will be in a position to also handle very confidently the second category, which is the taxation of various entities. And I'm telling you again and again, in this context, the entire base, the base and the foundation is PGBP, and that is what you will be having a very formidable understanding. As now we are going through it, as today itself we will start off with the first topic, which is your PGBP. You just compare students, the first topic is the game, and we will invest the time not only to build across the topic of PGBP, but build across the foundation for this 45% of your syllabus. This 45% of your 70 marks will build a strong foundation, so that you will feel very confident in terms of handling this particular area, and you will be at ease. My book 1 and book 2 essentially caters to this two particular area. Essentially, this caters to this particular area. Then thereafter students, charitable trust, institution, political party, 5 to 10%. Tax planning and tax avoidance and tax evasion, again 5 to 10%. So it's 5 marks approximately is what they allocate for this particular area of your syllabus. Collection and recovery of tax and refund, so that particular category students herein. So collection and recovery of tax, 15 to 20%, that is a TDS provision. So TDS provision which will be there, that will be somewhere between 15 to 20% of your 70 marks. Thereafter, this particular part, assessment procedure, which will be our book number 3. Herein, so book number 3 will be your assessment procedure. This entire area, 15 to 25% of your 70 marks will be in relation to this particular syllables. Liability in special cases, representative SSE, all this would be for 5 to 10% of the SIB marks. So that is primarily how they are given the splitting. As 30 marks we all know would be for international taxation. I'm not going to go through this particular allocation because you may not be that conversant about what is the content of the syllables at this point of time. This is the particular bird's eye view so that you understand the nuances of the bifurcation of the entire marks for the entire paper. The first volume, which is now given to all of you students, a colorful booklet altogether. So herein you have this tax rates, the topic which we have already considered. Then thereafter the principle of interpretation, classification of income is what we have just now have dealt up till now, isn't it? So the classification of income is what we have just now dealt up till now, and the topic that we are now going to deal with it would be the topic on PGBP. And then thereafter the PGBP is the what we have got it. So the index also, students, is very detailed, and you will appreciate that in the particular topic, whatever is the subtopic, in relation to that subtopic, what is the pointers that we are discussing. So for each of the pointers you will have the relevant page number, so that will ease out your cross referencing so far as the topic is concerned. So that is the comprehensive index is how we have made it for this particular paper. I'll just quickly go through this. Students, tax rate, as I have told you, and I'll keep on repeating it again, we have to keep on referring this tax rate again and again. In fact, in your next module also, tax rate topic always would be kept at the first particular benchmark, because while you calculate your tax liability, all the questions relating to tax liability, you have to keep on cross-referencing. You need to do a what? Cross-referencing of this particular topic. So because of this cross-referencing purpose, this particular tax rate topic is always critical in all the questions which involves the computation of tax liability. In all the questions which will involve the computation of tax liability. I have already told you earlier also, I am repeating it again. Tax liability, students, the tax is a function of two factors, the total income and the rate of tax. For the rate of tax, there are two sources further, and those two sources are, one is the first is all about the special rate of tax which is given to you in the Income Tax Act, and thereafter on the balance total income, the rate as per the Finance Act. So initially I have given you the rate as per the Finance Act primarily. So this is the rate that is given to you, students, as per the Finance Act. Okay, depending upon who you are. First of all, individual HUF, AOP, BOI, artificial juridical person, for them there is a slab rate mechanism as per the Finance Act applicable to this particular category of the person. So this is a slab rate which has been given. If you see thereafter, this is your alternate tax regime. What it is? It is your alternate tax regime as per the Finance Act 2020. This I am not going to discuss it right now, but I have kept it over here so as to facilitate your final revision. Once this topic is also being done comprehensively, at that point of time, students, when you do the final revision, at that stage, this alternate tax scheme for each and every person will always be helpful for you to finalize your revision in respect of the same. So this is the scheme, alternate tax scheme for the individual category. Those are the is a point which has been given to you. Thereafter, students, the surcharge element, how the surcharge would be there. Again, while you calculate the tax liability at that time, I will be telling you the calculation of the surcharge. All these factors would be told when we discuss the same. Here one case study I have given to you is about the example on the surcharge calculation. This any case we will do it in capital gains. In the capital gains topic, there is one very special provision which was introduced in the last year about the applicability of the higher rate of surcharge. Applicability of what? Applicability of the higher rate of surcharge. If you see, students, here there are 10%, 15%, 25%, 37%. This is the applicability of the higher rate surcharge applicable on the individual HUF, AOP, BOI, artificial juridical person to whom the slab rate is applicable. For them, this higher rate of surcharge of 25% and 37% is applicable. So that is one particular point that we will look into it. However, you will also appreciate there is one amendment which was being made in the last year in the capital gains topic, wherein in respect of a particular category of income, in respect of what? A particular category of the income, on that when you calculate the tax, at that point of time the higher rate of surcharge of this 25% and 37% will not be applicable on the tax which is calculated on this particular category of income. What is that particular category of income under the head capital gains? That something is what we are going to discuss in the chapter capital gains taxation. At that point of time, I will be going through this particular part, but here I have given that example, which is a very popular example, which is there in the domain. So therefore, this is the one particular point. Education says that is fine. Rebate 87A, students, you all are aware, up to rupees 5 lakhs, the rebate, the tax rebate that you get primarily is 12,500 or 100% of the tax, whichever is lower. So that is the rebate, again applicable to the first category of the person, which is individual HUF, AOP, BOI, artificial jurisdictional person. This is a situation that is there. Next to that is, students, cooperative society. Again, for cooperative society, there is an alternate tax scheme. Apart from the normal Finance Act, there is also an alternate tax scheme. Students, just up till now, whatever we have discussed, I told you about one particular point, which was about that even if the SSE is having an alternate, he is opting for the alternate tax scheme, for which the total income has to be calculated as per that alternate tax scheme. Even the total income will be calculated as per the alternate tax scheme. And I have already have told you that when they calculate the total income, they have to forgo what? Forgo all the big deductions. All the big deductions needs to be foregone in calculating the total income as per the alternate tax scheme, isn't it? Now, if in that particular total income calculated as per the alternate tax scheme, if in that total income, if there is what? There is special income which is chargeable to special rate of tax. If there is a special income which is chargeable to special rate of tax, so the question to all of you is that whether on that special income which is chargeable to the special rate of tax, will the special rate of tax rate, will it be applicable? And the answer is yes. So on that particular special income included in that total income calculated as per the alternate tax scheme, the special rate of tax will continue to apply. So whether you are opting for the alternate tax scheme or you are going with your existing provision of total income, whichever primary option that you exercise, if the total income which has been computed in either of the category, if it includes special income, then the special income will continue to be charged at the special rate of tax. So this is one point that we have already have kept in our mind. While we proceed further, this is the point that we have already have kept in mind. So just keep in the thought process this particular important aspect. So cooperative society, students, we will look into it. Firm and the local authority, again a special rate of tax has been given. 30% flat is a rate which has been given. Domestic company as well, students. If you see for the domestic company, company taxation, students, module number 5, we will be discussing this particular company taxation. Normal tax rate 30% turnover based. So this is what I will not discuss it right now. So this is a very comprehensive discussion that we will do it in the company taxation. 115BAB, 115BAA and 115BA. So this is the table which I have given you, will enable you or will be very, very helpful for all of you at the time of your final revision. This table will really go a long way. Foreign company. Again, for the foreign company, this is a particular rate of tax as per the Finance Act which is being applicable for them, and the corresponding surcharge. The corresponding surcharge which has been there. So students, as far as a foreign company is concerned, we don't have any special or alternate tax scheme. Alternate tax scheme is not applicable in respect of a foreign company. Students, keep that particular point always in mind. Alternate tax scheme is not applicable for a foreign company. So that is also, we will do an analysis about the alternate tax scheme getting not applicable to a particular foreign company. That analysis also we will look into it in that company taxation. This is some marginal relief, students. Question I have given it to you. I will not discuss it presently because when the tax liability question comes, there are a couple of area where this particular point will be very, very helpful for all of you students. Okay, at that point of time, herein you will have a very much a good grip as far as this point is concerned. So herein, students, in this particular context, we have the marginal relief calculation is been there in this context. Now coming to point number 3, the special tax rate under the Income Tax Act. The special tax rate under what? Under the Income Tax Act. Now students, if you see all over here the special tax rates, you have certain, as I told you, we will have to remember these special tax rates, because this would equally will be applicable in computing the total income as per the existing provision, or in computing the total income in the alternate tax scheme. In either of the case, this particular special income, if it is included in the total income in either of the option, it will continue to be taxed at the special rate. What are the special rate that you should always remember so far as your discussion is concerned? This is the list of the special rate, students, which you need to remember. This is the list that you need to remember. Okay, don't worry, nothing now. Lot of things are in respect of NR taxation. So many things we are going to learn in the NR taxation. Many things we will learn for the domestic company rates and all. We will come to know. There are certain things that we will read it. So over a period of time, you will cover it up, all the special rate tables which has been given to you over here. But we have kept it over here for the purpose of having all the special tax rate at one place, so as to facilitate your final revision. Okay, so that is it in this regard, students. Here section 6 of the Finance Act 2020, I have kept it over here for your last revision. This is one of the very important amendment which has been made in respect of the non-resident taxation. Very important amendment which has been made in respect of the non-resident taxation. So this section 6 of the FA 2020 is what we will be discussing in the NR taxation. I have kept this very important amendment here itself. Again, you will appreciate the same. Principle of interpretation. This topic, students, this topic as such, you will not be doing it in this topic itself. While you are in this topic, please don't do this topic. This topic has to be dealt as and when you are doing other topic. At that time when you are doing the interpretation part, those particular point of time that this topic would be critical. Like for example, up till now, students, if you remember, we have done some interpretation particular skill about specific provision will prevail over the general provision. Remember that in earlier lecture, which I have already taken to all of you, we have discussed that if there is any deadlock, or there is any issue between a general provision and between a special provision, then the special provision will prevail. Special provision will prevail over the general provision. The special provision will prevail over the general provision. That is what I have told you. There is a Latin phrase of the same. What is that? If you can recall that. Generalia specialibus non derogant. So if there is a general provision and if there is a special provision, then the special provision will always prevail over the general provision. The special provision will always prevail over the general provision is what we have all looked into it. So therefore, students, this particular part also would be quite critical in terms of our understanding and our interpretations. So this topic, students, as I have told you now, we will be discussing it primarily not as a topic at itself, but while we are doing the interpretation of some of the points in some different topic, that stage, this principle of interpretation is what I'm going to involve, so that you will appreciate. Otherwise, it's a very dry topic. If you only try to learn principle of literal interpretation, principle of harmonious interpretation, it will then become quite dry. You just need to know how to apply. At what point of time the literal interpretation would be made, what point of time the harmonious interpretation can come into play, all that aspect you should be doing it primarily while the provision that you are reading is in front of you. So this, but again, for a topic per se, I have kept it as a topic over here, principle of interpretation, so that it will help you to consolidate and quickly wrap it up, this particular part as well. This, students, you can write principle of interpretation, this topic, but if you can just write, if possible, important for MCQ. So if at all they will ask anything about it, they will try to target for MCQ purpose. So a dedicated standalone question, on this topic, if at all it can be there, then it will be possible only for what? Only for the MCQ purpose. Dedicated standalone, I'm talking about it. Okay, students, keep that particular point in mind. With this now, the topic that we have discussed, classification of income. Please understand, to Now students, if you find one more point which I'll tell you about the presentation. Can you see the pages which are being blank? You'll say, what is the, why you have kept it blank? So that the notes against the topic you will keep writing in those blank pages. The note against the topic you can keep it writing in the blank pages. That is what the reason why has been given to you over here. Although we have already done with this topic on classification of income. We have already done with what? This topic on classification of income. I've made you write it, but going forward students, going forward, the topic when I start with you PGBP, all the notes you will try to capture it in the booklet itself. All the notes you will try to capture it in the book itself if possible. Now there are some students, I can just tell you their approach. Sometimes students when they write and they find that okay, the space is not like they are running out of the pages for that topic. So what they do is that they write the notes some in fullscape. So these students write the notes in the fullscape and then they staple that fullscape in that particular note so as to make a very comprehensive particular coverage so far as this booklet is concerned. So do it once, but do it best. This is what is the mantra that you are going to follow it as far as the coverage is concerned. Coming on this particular part. Classification of income we have already considered. Before classification, again I am repeating, the journey is all that of the total income, which is your 45% of that 70 marks, 70% of your syllables, 70% of your syllables. The 45% of the marks will be from this side. So the journey that we have to go through it is that of the total income. The charge is on the total income. Total income means, students, if you remember, it means an income which falls within the scope of section 5 and which is computed in the manner which is laid down under the Act. So we have defined what you mean by the term income. Income means, please repeat with me, what do you mean by the term income? Income means the revenue receipt plus the specified capital receipt. And specified capital receipt, okay, specified where? In the definition. Which definition? The definition of income under section 2 clause 24. So income, which means income means now revenue receipt and the specified capital receipt. That income should fall within the scope of section 5 so as to fetch us the qualified income. So this will result into a qualified income. Income which falls within the scope of section 5, this will result into the qualified income, and this qualified income further will be computed in the manner which is laid down under the Act. This qualified income further will be computed in the manner which is laid down under the Act. This is what we have discussed so far up till now. Now students, I am again repeating this point that when you do the computation is always in respect of the qualified income. Now when you do the computation, that is the statement that you prepare, particulars, amount and amount, that statement will involve the amount which essentially is only the qualifying income. So an amount which cannot be considered as the qualifying income, that will not be taken to the stage of the computation. That will not be taken to the stage of the computation is what we have discussed up till now. Okay. Now, when we start the computation of the qualified income, the very first step is to do what? Is to do the classification. Why classification has to be done? The classification has to be done because income is computed under this Act in 5 different heads, and each particular heads of income does not have the same rule of computation. They have a distinct rule of computation, and therefore it is very critical that in computation of the total income, in computation of the qualified income, which we will do, the classification of the income into their appropriate heads are very critical. A wrong classification will result into a wrong computation in that head and eventually will lead to a wrong total income and finally a wrong computation of tax liability. And therefore the first step primarily is to ensure in computation, the first step is to ensure that we have classified our qualifying income into the appropriate heads. Now up till now students, what we have discussed was the principle of classification. Up till now we have discussed how the classification will be done. So the classification students, the principle of classification, the first one is the specific charge. Specific charge, unconditional, conditional. is what we have discussed, isn't it? So unconditionally, the amount, a particular amount may be specifically charged to a particular head, or there is a specific reference of an amount which is charged to a particular head on satisfaction or fulfillment of a certain condition. So first thing in the classification is the specific charge of the amount. As if the amount is not specifically charged, then the balance qualifying amount will be classified into the appropriate head based on the general based on the test laid down in the general charging section. So there is, every heads will have the general charging section, and in that general charging section the balance qualifying amount will be classified depending upon the test. So what we have discussed, students, in the last lecture up till now was the test of this particular general charging section. That is what we have discussed so far up till now. The test of the general charging section is what we have discussed, students, the test up till now. And I think we have done the interplay of house property versus PGBP, the interplay between PGBP and capital gains through various case laws that we have discussed. And this case law, students, if you find this chapter will have the case law. One particular case law, students, I just wanted to discuss with you before we can proceed further is this Henkel's Pick India Limited. Let me quickly discuss, because this was the only case law which I haven't discussed with all of you right now. So let me quickly go through this particular case law. Rest of this have been done. You will say, sir, Raila Corporation is not done, New Delhi Hotels Limited. No, if you go through that, you will come to know it is already coming through Chennai Properties and Investment Limited. This case law is capturing all the principle of Chennai Properties and Investment Limited. So that is what this case laws are all about. New Delhi Hotels Limited is that case law about the builder who is holding the real estate as a stock in trade, the building as a stock in trade, and he is getting a rent. So the rent income for the builder who holds the real estate as a stock in trade, that rental income will be charged under the head house property, is what we have discussed in our previous segment of the lectures. So that is what is, you get it in that New Delhi Hotels Limited case law. So this case law, which is about Henkel's Pick India Limited, I'll just quickly discuss because this was something which we have not touched upon it. So let me first quickly go through the same, and then we can quickly run through the same thing in this context. So students, herein, if you take into account this Henkel's Pick India Limited, facts of the case, I'll just let you know what were the facts of the case. First, the facts of the case, the company had given the public issue, has gone for the public issue, and accordingly it received the share application money. Okay, it received the share application money. Now students, in the SEBI guidelines, there is a particular provision which says that until the shares are allotted to the applicant, the money has to be invested. Invested where? The money has to be invested in a trust account. So therefore that money has to be invested in a trust account, and therefore till the time you make the allotment of the shares. So what the company did, it had to put the money, the application money was put up in the trust account. In that particular account, the interest income got accrued in that particular previous year. In that particular account, the interest income got accrued in that particular previous year. But up till the end of the previous year, the company hasn't given any allotment so far. Up till the end of that particular previous year, the company hasn't given any allotment of that particular shares to the applicants. The assessing officer, what he did was, he charged that interest which was so accrued, in the hands of, in whose hands? In the hands of the company. So therefore the question that was there was this, that whether the interest income earned by whom? Earned by the shareholder. Interest income which was accrued in that particular trust account, can that interest income be charged in the hands of the company in the year in which the allotment hasn't been made? In the year in which the allotment hasn't been made, whether in that very year itself can the interest income be charged in the hands of the company, was the issue in this particular case law. Interest was accrued, but the allotment was not made in that previous year. So question was this, that whether the assessing officer is correct in assessing that interest income in the hands of the company even though in that year the allotment of the shares was not been made. What is your take, students? What do you think? Whether this interest income, will that be chargeable in the hands of the company in that year in which the allotment is not yet made? Will it be chargeable in the hands of the company? What is your take, students? Let me know. To that, the answer is definitely no. It cannot be made chargeable in the hands of. It cannot be made chargeable in the hands of whom? In the hands of the company. You'll say, sir, what is the reason? Because until and unless, students, until and unless the company makes an allotment, it can neither use this particular principal amount nor it can utilize this interest which is accrued on that particular principal amount. So it does not have any right to utilize the principal amount, nor it has any right to use that interest which is accrued on that particular principal amount till the allotment has been made. Why do I say so? Because, students, just imagine if tomorrow because of oversubscription, of the shares, if the company has to refund that particular amount, because of the oversubscription of the shares, the company has to refund that particular amount, then my question to all of you therefore is, whether when the company will have to refund that particular amount, will it refund only the principal or it has to refund along with interest? Will it refund only the principal or it has to refund along with interest? It has to refund along with interest. Otherwise, every particular person will become a company and then they will ask for money, put it in the trust account and then refund the principal amount and let the interest be pocketed in that context. So that is not possible. So therefore, they have to refund not only the principal but along with the interest. It means that the right to receive, please pay attention to this statement, it means that the right to receive that interest which was accrued on the principal amount, that right to receive the interest will be when the company has made the allotment of the shares. So unless and until the right is established of the company on that interest income which is accrued, the chargeability cannot be attracted. Please be careful, students. If you remember the first class which we did, section 4, the charging section, section 4, what it said, charging section, the total income of a person for a previous year. So the total income is not an independent concept. It is an total income of a person, meaning thereby the right of the person exists so as to receive that particular income, and that is what is the subject matter of chargeability. So it cannot be a chargeability of only the income, it is a chargeability of the income of a person. So unless and until the right is established of a particular person to receive the income, the chargeability cannot be attracted. And that is the reason why, students, in the year in which the company has not made any allotment but the interest got accrued in that particular account, that year you cannot attract the chargeability in the hands of the company. Yes, in the next year when the shares are being allotted, then the company will take that particular principal as well as the interest income in their particular bank account, and that would be the correct previous year. That will be the correct previous year of chargeability of that particular interest income. So here the discussion is, which is the correct previous year of the chargeability of the income. The correct previous year of chargeability of the income will be the year in which the person has the right to receive the same. This, on the basis of this principle, that this case law was being introduced. So just quickly let's have a look to this particular case law of Henkel Spic India Limited. Tamil Nadu, see, we have done this one. Raj Dadarkar, also students we have done. I have told you earlier also, I am repeating it again. In Raj Dadarkar points, there were 2 points. One was about the deemed ownership. While we are discussing, students, Raj Dadarkar, I told you at that time, there was an angle of a deemed ownership. Why this deemed ownership angle was being there? Because here this particular company, the firm, partnership firm, has taken the building on lease. So applying section 27 of the deemed owner, that this judgment was being delivered, and the partnership firm being the lessee was held to be the deemed owner as per section 27. This part we haven't discussed. I told you we will discuss this thing in the topic of house property. But the other part was relevant, that this company, this firm being a deemed owner, were in receipt of the rental income by letting out this particular house property. And therefore our discussion was, students, whether this rent that they have received, can that be classified under the head PGBP or under the head house property, for which I think we have made the discussion, and finally the conclusion that in this particular case law, the rental income will be classified under which head? Under the head house property. So this we have already discussed in Raj Dadarkar and Associates. K & Co interest income, we have already. Where is this Henkel Spic which has gone? This case. So issue, what are the facts of the case? Quickly, hear it. So here, students, Henkel Spic India Limited, the SSE, had come out with public issue on 29th of Jan 1992 and received the application money which was deposited in bank account in accordance with statutory requirement. In June 1992, the SSE refunded the money along with interest to person who could not be allotted the shares. That was in June 1992, which means they have received the money in previous year 91-92, because it is 29th of Jan 92, so previous year 91-92, and they refund not all but portion of the money in June 1992, which means 92-93. Contention of the AO is to tax the entire interest in the year of the public issue, which is AY 92-93, previous year 91-92. Issue raised: whether interest income earned on share application money deposited with a bank for a specified period in accordance with statutory requirement becomes taxable in AY in which allotment is completed or in the year of accrual. So which would be the year of chargeability? The year of allotment primary or the year of accrual? Let's have a look. So provision, I have given it over here. See the analysis directly, students. Timing of recognition, point number 1. The interest earned on deposit cannot be regarded as an amount available to the SSE for its own use until the allotment of shares got completed. Until the allotment of the shares got completed and monies are returned to those whom shares are not allotted. That is what we have discussed, isn't it? It cannot be considered as an amount available to the SSE for its use unless the allotment process is over and the shares has been allotted. Till that time the SSE will not have the fund for its own use. Right to receive. No part of this fund, principal and interest, can be utilized by the company until the allotment process is completed. So till the time, students, the allotment process is completed, the right to receive will not be established. The interest along with the allotment money needs to be repaid to the person to whom shares could not be allotted, and it is only after the allotment process the balance remaining application money, underline this word, balance remaining application money along with interest can be regarded as belonging to the company only after the allotment is over. And that is what the conclusion is all about. Fine. So the year of chargeability will be the year in which the allotment has been made. That will be the correct year of the chargeability of the interest income. Which interest income? Not that interest income which has to be refunded on account of the oversubscription. So you have to refund both the principal along with the interest. I'm not talking about that interest, but the interest income which the company finally has got in its account in respect of the allotment of the shares. That is what will be ultimately be chargeable, but in the year. Which previous year? The year in which the allotment is made. So here the underlying question was whether which will be the correct previous year so far as the chargeability of interest income is concerned. Okay. With that now, students, we come to our topic. And the topic is PGBP. Students, that's precisely the topic which we are discussing herein. So, in this context, again, for every topic we have got the topic wise index as well, so that we know that where exactly the things will be considered. Let's start with this one. Students, now I will use this particular for first only analysis of 28.1, the general charging section 28.1. I'll use this previous particular chapter, this thing. So I can just write herein in this context 28.1. Although the notes are given here, but our discussion class notes, instead of writing it at the end of this topic, I'm just using it to write it in the previous topic, classification topic, where I've got the space. Theory notes, page number. So any of the page number in the classification topic, we'll start with the blank which I've got it over here. So I'll start with this. Only the general charging section of PGBP. Okay, only that general charging section of PGBP. I'll just we'll analyze it over here, and then whatever are thereafter, all the discussion, we will just continue with that particular the space which I have allotted to all of you there in that respective page. But only for this, just write the page number, because I'll be doing a very comprehensive discussion right now with all of you. Students, up till now, if you see, while I was discussing the charging section, the general charging section, for the purpose of the classification of the balance qualifying income into the appropriate head, while I was discussing the general charging section, I have discussed briefly for salary. I have also discussed briefly for house property. What is the test laid down by section 22? The ownership of the property should consist of building or land appurtenant thereto, and the third one is the property should not be used by the SSC for the purpose of his business and profession. That was a test laid down by the chargeability under section 22. For the capital gain also, section 45, I have discussed briefly that particular general chargeability under section 45.1, and that general chargeability under section 45.1 was about what? The gain arising on the transfer, of a capital asset will be chargeable in the previous year in which the transfer take place. The gain arising on the transfer of the capital asset will be chargeable in the previous year in which the transfer take place. So even this particular part, we have discussed it in the context of the capital gains topic as well, and the last particular topic was the IFRS 56.1. So I have discussed with all of you the general chargeability, although briefly, because when the respective topic we are going to unfold, at that point of time we'll do a comprehensive analysis. Now we will in fact try to do a very detailed analysis of the test laid down by the general chargeability under the head PGBP. General chargeability. Again, I'm repeating thing. I'll be keeping on repeating this point of thing again and again till it settles down in your mind. That look, the recourse to the general charge, will be made only if the qualifying income does not have any specific charge in any of the heads of income. If the qualifying income does not have any specific charge in any of the heads of income, only in that case that the balance qualifying income, will be classified under the head PGBP. So let's have a look to this particular proposition then. Here, section 28(1). All of you will copy down this one. Those who haven't got yet the textbook, they can write it in your normal notes, which you can later on attach to this one. And those who are writing it, you can just write it at the start of the blank space. So I'll just use this particular part here, the detailed notes, and the page numbering of 28(1 there. We'll just put it over here. 28(1. Please write. Profit and gains from business and profession carried on by the SSE at any time during the previous year. At any time during the previous year. Okay, now students, what we can do in this context, all of you will now make this as, give the serial number to this point. Profit and gains from business and profession carried on by the SSE at any time during the previous year. At any time during the previous year. Make this thing, because we have to discuss each and every aspect very carefully. One thing, students, now you would have realized that how we identify. I told you that one thing earlier also, that the first section of every heads of income will be the charging section or general charge of that particular heads of income. The first section of the heads of income. Every heads of income will be the general charge. So this is the first particular section, 28(1). Other way of looking at it is that what is charged, students, what is charged is the profit and gains. What is charged over here is a profit and gains. So the chargeability is in respect of the profit and gains, which is again a very generic term, isn't it? Which is again what? A very general term. Now students, just before we can proceed herein, they have used the term gain. Be very careful about this one. Whenever they employ the term gain, as distinguished from the term profit, gain as distinguished from the term profit, how they are different with each other. So the gain, student, generally means what? That it is arising in respect of a transaction which generally is not recurring in nature. It is arising from a transaction which is generally not a recurring in nature. That is what will result into a gain. Whereas whenever a transaction is recurring in nature, then that will result into a profit. If you remember our previous session, while we were discussing that case law of the MP High Court in Suresh Chandra Goyal's case, at that time we got an opportunity to discuss and deliberate the definition of business. at that point of time we have told and we have discussed that the business will also include adventure, but not all the adventure will be considered as a business. Only that adventure which is in the nature of trade, commerce or business will qualify as an trade, commerce and manufacture will qualify as a business. But the fact that business includes the adventure, what it means? It means that even a particular single activity, not a recurring activity, but a particular single activity can also qualify as what? As a business. And that is the reason why they have used the term gain along with the term profits. So gain connotes those single activity which has all the ingredients to be considered as a business activity. Okay, and therefore through those activity, whatever is the income that will arise, that will be referred as what? As a gain, chargeable under this head, provided it qualifies as what? As a business. Okay, so that is the reason why the gains as a term has been used. Profit also, I told you, profit means those which is arising from the amount which is arising from a recurring activity. That particular amount will be known as profit. Coming now to this particular proposition, if you are all through with this, profit and gains from business and profession carried on by the SSC at any time during the previous year. Let's start with this one. Now students, I'll directly give you an example and from that we'll build up the concept. Students, supposingly in the profit and loss account which has been given to you, you will also make the profit and loss account. So just write here first point, profit and gains. Okay, in that we are making this discussion. Profit and gains, in that we are making this discussion. So in the profit and gains, friends, say this is debit and this is credit. So I'm just writing to loss of stock by fire. To loss of stock by fire, say rupees 2 lakhs. This is debited. Okay, and finally you have your net profit. To loss of stock by fire. So my question to all of you therefore is whether this loss of stock by fire, will that be allowed as deduction or not? Whether this loss of stock by fire, will that be allowed as deduction or not? So students, if it is chargeable is what you all say. In this context, the question therefore is, please also think about what? Think about the possible reason for the purpose of the deduction that will be given to this particular loss of stock by fire. Do particular discussion on this particular thing about loss of stock by fire. What is the possible reason for the purpose of the deduction? What is the possible reason? If at all deduction has been given in this regard, what is the possible reason why the deduction would be given in this context? What would be the reason for that? Loss of stock by fire? Any section? Okay, tell me any section which you can contemplate where this deduction would be allowed for those students who are saying that yes, deduction should be allowed. Because we can recall in our IPCC we have done something like this. So if you have already done something like this, so my question therefore to all of you is that what is the basis of giving the deduction of loss of stock by fire? What is the basis? Any section reference that you can quote for those students who are saying that yes, it will be allowed as deduction. For those students who are saying no, it will be disallowed. So even for them, do you have any reasons why it should be disallowed? Reasons are the game, students. Without reason, right or wrong will have no value so far as your paper direct tax is concerned. Our entire focus would be to establish an ability to think primarily, clearly, critically and analytically about any particular item of adjustment that we all do under the income tax law. Unless and until you can establish that ability to think critically and analytically about why the adjustments are being done, it becomes very difficult not only for your CA final examination, that is the first step, but also in your professional life. So let's look upon to this. So those who are saying that yes, it will be allowed as a deduction, so majority of the students would be of the opinion that the deduction will be allowed in section 37(1). That is to say, the general deduction is what is the referencing. The general deduction is what is the referencing that the students are providing for. General deduction. So 37(1). Those students who are saying primarily 37(1) is the general deduction, there the deduction will be given. Okay, fair enough. If you say that under 37(1), the general deduction, this loss of stock by fire will be allowed as deduction. So accordingly, let's focus on that section itself, 37(1). The section 37(1) tells you about the deduction of those items which is not specifically covered under section 32-36. So yes, I can tell you with full assurance and authority that this item of loss of stock by fire is not specifically covered in any of the section of section 32, section 36. Okay, so therefore, if at all you are saying that it is general deduction, so I have already relieved you from the baggage of 32-36. 32-36 students, it is not referred. So therefore 37(1), yes, it will be covered. But what is covered in 37(1) is the expenditure that you have incurred for the purpose of business and profession. What is covered in 37(1) is the expenditure that you have incurred for the purpose of business and profession. So the deduction is not in respect of the deduction is not in respect of the deduction is not in respect of the expenditure. Sorry, the deduction is not in respect of the losses, but the deduction is in respect of the expenditure. What 37(1) covers is the expenditure and not the loss. And please be careful that the term loss and the term expenditure are distinct to each other. Do you all agree to this particular proposition? That the term loss and the term expenditure are two distinct concepts. Do you all agree to this one? Yes. Loss is a consequence of some event, and the expenditure is an amount that you incur in a transaction. So what is sought to be covered? What is sought to be covered in section 37(1) is the expenditure, whereas the deduction contemplated over here is that of loss. So please be careful. In 37(1), you don't have the mandate to claim the deduction. You don't have the mandate to claim the deduction of the loss of stock by fire. So now, those who were saying that yes, it will be allowed as deduction under section 37(1), now what is your answer? Still you will stick your neck to section 37(1) and will you say that it will be allowed? At least on 37(1) it is not allowed. So under which section then that this particular loss will be allowed as deduction? Under which section then this particular loss will be then allowed as deduction? So students, the section now has to be, please pay attention, this is one of the most important section, and that section is section 145. 145 of the Income Tax Act. Now what this section 145 of the Income Tax Act says, as far as this section 145 is concerned, it says that in computing the income under the head PGBP or under the head IFOS, in computing what? The income under the head PGBP or under the head IFOS, the income shall be computed having regard to what? having regard to the commercial accounting principles. So the income under these two heads shall be computed having regard to the commercial accounting principle. So if at all that is the mandate which has been given, so it means that when I compute the income under these two heads, I have to take into account the commercial accounting principle, and that is what we do. For these two heads, we follow the commercial accounting principle so as to determine the income under these two heads, and once that income has been determined as per the commercial accounting principle, that thereafter we go ahead and make the adjustment, the specific adjustment which is covered in the head PGBP. That is from section 28 to section 43D. The specific adjustment which is covered under section 28 to 43D. Students, if you can recall in your IPCC, what you used to do in PGBP? Add less, isn't it? But that add less was on a particular base value. What is that base value? The net profit as per the books for business. And that is what was the income which is determined as per the commercial accounting principle. So therefore, the adjustment that you have done, that adjustment was in respect of a base amount, and that base amount was nothing but an income which is determined as per the commercial accounting principle. So first and foremost is you have to find out whether the income on which further specific adjustment that you want to do under section 28 to 43D, whether that income, whether that base amount, can that be considered as what? As an income as per the commercial accounting principle. This is what we all need to focus upon. And let's have a look then in this context. Income as per commercial accounting principle. How do you tell this to be an income as per the commercial accounting principle? Please pay attention in this context. So herein, students, this accounting P&L, which will result into income. Okay. Now, students, as we all know, P&L can be of two types. Herein, P&L is always having a two categorization that we all do. One is, this is known as the trading part. The trading items, okay, which will result into finally the gross profit. Remember that GP that you get, and then finally then below the line, then you get the net profit. So till the gross profit, whatever the items which are being pushed up, they are necessarily the trading items. Opening stock, closing stock, purchase, sales, all these are nothing but the trading items. Fair enough. Apart from that, this particular items up till the net profit, they will be considered as what? They will be considered in this regard as what? They are those items which are not a trading item, but they are those items which are considered as an items which are incurred in the normal course of business. So herein, expenses, this side expense, loss or allowances which are incurred in the normal course of business. Expense, loss or allowances which are incurred in the normal course of business is what you push it over there, and that will finally result to you what? The net profit. Like for example, salary, traveling expenditure, they are not a trading item, but can we therefore say they are, although not a trading item, but they constitute an expenditure which are incurred in the normal course of business? And the answer is yes. And that is what therefore is captured in your profit and loss account, which is as per the commercial accounting principle, and that is what will result into your net profit, which we can say is determined as per the commercial accounting principle. Is what is determined as per the commercial accounting principle. Now you tell me, therefore, the debit of loss of stock by fire. The debit of what? The loss of stock by fire of rupees 2 lakhs. Can this debit be considered as a deduction? Can this debit be considered as a deduction which is as per the commercial accounting principle? As per the commercial accounting principle, and the answer is yes. Why? It is nothing but a trading loss. A trading item, it is a trading loss, and therefore a debit of this loss of stock by fire is nothing but a deduction in respect of a trading loss, and hence will be allowed in computing the profit and gains as per the commercial accounting principle. In computing the profit as per what? The commercial accounting principle. Now what we are supposed to do is this, that once we know that so far as in arriving at the base amount, this particular item is allowed as per the commercial accounting principle. In arriving at the base amount, this particular item is allowed as per the commercial accounting principle. What is that we need to do further? What is that we need to do further? We are supposed to, students, find out, is there any specific provision? Is there what? Any specific provision which disallow this particular item? So once we know that in the base amount, it has to be considered, it has to be factored in determining the base amount. It needs to be factored in determining the base amount. What we need to now look into it is that, is there any specific provision? Is there any specific provision which disqualifies or disallows the same? So you tell me, any provision in your IPCC that you have done which says that under section 28 to section 43D, this particular loss is disallowed. Under section 28 to section 43D, this particular loss is disallowed. Have you came across with any such proposition? And the answer is no. So there is no such particular disallowance which is there so far as this particular item is concerned. And therefore, students, what we will then say is that, in that regard, what is that we are going to say? We are going to say that this particular loss, because it is determined, it is a debit which is as per the commercial accounting principle, and therefore in determining the profit and gains, it will be allowed as deduction. And the fact that there is no specific provision, and the fact that there is no specific provision which disallows this particular loss, therefore it will continue to be allowed as deduction. I give you more examples, students, so that it will really clear your concept. Students, let me tell you about the other particular example. I'll give you the notes, don't worry, students, but just first try to capture the essence of the concept which I'm introducing in front of you at this point of time. Students, what about the fact, if you remember, in your IPCC also, or in your BCom, you would have done this very popular adjustment. Opening stock and closing stock is undervalued or overvalued. So for that undervaluation and overvaluation of the opening stock and the closing stock, you have done certain adjustments. Remember that. You all have done this adjustment of the opening stock and the closing stock. So there were adjustment that was being made in those opening and the closing stock. So my question therefore to all of you is this: when you were doing the adjustment, you were doing the reconciliation about the overvaluation or the undervaluation, as the case may be. You are doing the reconciliation in determining the profit and gains. Therefore the question was, under which section you did? You did it for the sake of doing it, but did you realize under which section you are supposed to do that reconciliation? So the section was something, the reconciliation was required. The reconciliation was required so as to arrive at the correct base amount. The reconciliation was required so as to arrive at what? The correct base amount. And what is the base amount? The net profit, the profit as per the commercial accounting principle. And therefore, because in the trading item, opening stock and the closing stock were undervalued, they were not as per the method of accounting regularly followed by the SSE. Therefore, this reconciliation is necessary in order to determine the profit as per the commercial accounting principle. That was the mandate where you did that adjustment in computing your chargeable profit and gains under the head PGBP. That was the mandate. So there was no specific section under the head PGBP which has invited you to do that adjustment. So knowingly or unknowingly you did the adjustment, but where is the mandate to do the adjustment? It is given in 145, which gives the mandate that the statutory adjustment under the head PGBP from section 28 to section 43D will be in respect of what? Will be in respect of the profit which is as per the commercial accounting principle. So therefore there has to be a base amount which is the profit as per the commercial accounting principle, and on that base amount you do add less, which is from section 28 to section 43D. This is what will finally result into the profit and gains. Now students, please pay attention again further. Let's try to focus on this discussion and keep continuing with this discussion further. If you remember what I told you, this 145 covers the two heads. Which are those two heads? PGBP and IFOS, where on the base amount you will do the specific adjustments which are there from section 20 to 43D for PGBP, for IFOS from 56 to 59. That is for IFOS. What about the head house property and capital gains? Does 145 gives the same mandate for these two heads of income, which is house property and capital gains? Does section 145 also gives the same mandate for these other two heads of income, which is house property and capital gains? To that the answer is no. Section 145 does not give at all the mandate under the other two heads, namely HP and capital gains. What do you do therefore in HP and capital gains? What do you do therefore in HP and capital gains? So therefore students, what you actually do in HP and capital gains is, here house property income you will compute it. House property income you are going to compute it. How you compute the house property income? If you remember, GAV less municipal tax paid, NAV less standard deduction, and then finally what? Finally you had this particular the interest calculation on the borrowed capital. That finally will result into what? The income under the head house property. How about the head capital gains then? How you used to calculate the income under the head capital gains? So therefore for income under the head capital gains you used to have the full value of consideration less expenses on transfer. That will result into the net sale consideration. From that you will use to reduce cost of acquisition, cost of improvement, and finally you used to get what? The income under the head capital gains. The income which is there under the head capital gains. What is the short point? Now you tell me students, right from the first value, is there a base amount on which you do the adjustment for these two heads? Is there any base amount on which you do the adjustment under these two heads? And the answer is no. Whatever is the computational provisions which is given under these two heads, which is HP and CG, this is by themselves a self code. Self code means it is a complete code by themselves. Whatever is the computational method or the steps that they have given, by that is a complete code by themselves. It is starting from GAV. Remember students, the GAV calculation also the way you have done it in your IPCC, that the fair rent has to be calculated, all that you have done in IPCC. So what it was essentially, it was a complete code by itself. Right from the starting point till the ending point, everything was being covered. Right from the starting till the ending point, everything was being covered. It's therefore a complete code. Unlike in the case of PGBP and IFOS, wherein on the base amount you used to do add less like that. Like the popular adjustment, if I have to tell you in PGBP, depreciation as per books used to add back, less used to be depreciation under section 32. Isn't it? And that is how you should know 2 versus 2. There are two heads, which is PGBP and IFOS, versus the other two heads, which is house property and the head capital gains. Whereas these two heads has a base amount on which further statutory adjustment has to be done, where the other two heads, which is house property and capital gains, there you have the complete code of computation, right from the full value of consideration till the last particular step of deduction. How to calculate each and every aspect, like of full value of consideration or for house property GAV, all that has been provided to you in an explicit manner, and hence I say it is a complete code by itself. And that is what distinguishes between these 2 versus 2. Somebody will say, sir, what about salary? Haven't you forgotten salary? Lesser said than done. We have discussed earlier also about the hopeless situation which exists under the salary with a flat standard deduction of 50,000, nothing else. Yes, obviously for salary also it's a complete code, because you don't have any base value on which you do add and less. So salary also you can say for your mental satisfaction that salary is also what? A separate code by itself. If that makes you happy, isn't it? But 2 versus 2 is the game. PGBP, IFRS versus HP and capital gains. And as I told you, and I'm repeating it again, whereas in the case of PGBP and IFRS, there is a base amount which for which there is a mandate given to determine a base amount. On that base amount, the further adjustments has to be made. Further statutory adjustment has to be made. Where the base amount being, what is the base amount? The base amount being the profit as per the commercial accounting principle. On that, the further statutory adjustment from 28 to 43D as far as the head PGBP is concerned, and from 56 to section 59 so far as the head IFRS is concerned, shall be made to finally determine the chargeable profits in these two heads of income. And HP and capital gains, whatever is the computation mechanism that has been given in these two heads of income, they are by themselves a complete code. Did you all got this one, students? Fine. Let's look upon to this one quickly. We'll write it, this one. Now the notes. Section 145. Please write. As per section 145, comma, in computing the income under the head PGP and IFRS, comma, the method of accounting regularly followed the method of accounting regularly followed by the SSE shall be taken into account. The method of accounting regularly followed by the SSE shall be taken into account. Fine, students. Write next paragraph. Therefore, the profit under these two heads shall be determined as per the commercial accounting principle. As per the commercial accounting principle in the bracket cap, on which the further statutory adjustment shall be made underline the word further statutory adjustment shall be made given under these two heads of income. So therefore the profit under these two heads shall be determined having regard to the commercial accounting principle. Having regard to the commercial accounting principle on which the further statutory adjustment shall be made. Further statutory adjustment shall be made given under these two heads of income. Given under these two heads of income. Please write in the next paragraph again. For the purpose of the commercial accounting principle. Sorry, students, just you can write like this. Income as per commercial accounting principle means point number A, item a trading item or an item which is incurred in the normal course of business. In respect of the above two, comma, the method of accounting regularly followed by the SSE the method of accounting regularly followed by the SSE shall be taken into account in determining the profit and gains as per the cap. In determining the profit and gains as per the cap. Fine, students. Now, right, this particular proposition that we were discussing just now about this particular part, the commercial accounting principle. So here, right, next particular paragraph, the loss, next paragraph, students, the loss of stock by fire is a trading loss which has to be deducted, in determining the profit and gains as per the commercial accounting principle. I am now using this cap, students, but you will have to always use it full form. Don't use the abbreviation. So loss of stock by fire is a trading loss which has to be deducted in determining the profit and gains as per the cap. As per the cap. Please underline the word trading loss. Next point, similarly, adjustment in respect of the undervaluation and overvaluation of the opening or closing stock is to be made in order to determine the profit as per the cap on which the further statutory adjustments shall be made. On which further statutory adjustment shall be made. On which further statutory adjustment shall be made. Are you through with this one, students, now? Fine. So students, now we can say confidently and we can conclude that so far as the head PGBP, or the head IFRS is concerned, here these two heads involve only adjustments. The computation is as per the accounting concept, whereas these two heads then involves only about the adjustment, whereas the head house property and the head capital gains essentially involves the computation. Primarily because right from the first value till the last value, I have told you, you have to determine the figures, and therefore it is the head house property and the head capital gains where the real computation takes place, because whatever is given is a self code by itself, as compared to the head PGBP and the head IFRS where the computation is not made. What is essentially undertaken in the head PGBP and capital gains, PGBP and IFRS, is the adjustment. The computation is as per accounting. What is therefore given over here is what are the further statutory adjustment that has to be made on the base value, and the base value is the commercial accounting principle, the income determined as per the commercial accounting principle. Now, friends, if at all it has been given to you, say for example here, profit and loss account, please make one more profit and loss account, and right here in the same fire there is a loss to loss of, so there is a debit which is there to loss of plant and machinery by fire, say rupees 10 lakhs. Now if this is what has been debited to loss of plant and machinery by fire, if this is what has been debited, so therefore the question to all of you is, what I am supposed to do then? Shall I allow it as it is? Now you tell me. I can tell you and I can bet on this one. Those students who are now appearing for November 20 attempt, just now they are going to appear very soon, November 20 attempt, ask them this adjustment, many of them will say it is disallowed. The answer is indeed disallowed. But what is the reason of disallowance? They will say it is a capital loss and therefore not allowed under section 37(1). Many will say, not all, I am saying, but many. It is a capital loss and therefore not allowed. If you ask them further, you probe them further, not allowed where? They will say 37(1). Because in 37(1), students, they have given a reference that the item should not be capital in nature. So this loss is first of all appears to be a capital loss and therefore not allowed under section 37(1). That is what will be the general reasons that the students will give. Again, the answers are incorrect. Although the final adjustment is add back, yes, that is correct. You have to add it back, family. But the reasons that you are giving is incorrect reasons. You cannot simply say that I am going to add it back just because it is a capital loss and therefore it is not allowed under 37(1). Incorrect reasons. First of all, 37(1), please discard that 37(1) for any item which has to do with loss. 37(1) is only dealing with what? With the expenditure. And as we have said and concluded that loss is not equivalent to an expenditure. So please take away this concept at first place of loss being covered within the ambit of 37(1). You should always focus, as a student, you should always focus that, look, that is covering only the expenditure. So therefore, this loss, family, will have to be then considered. There is no specific provision then which actually disallows this loss. So the guiding factor about its allowability or not will then be as per the commercial accounting principle. Because if you travel across all the sections, the specific sections covered under the head PGBP, if you travel across all the sections, you will not even find a single section which covers this particular entry. And that is the reason why I told you then it requires us to then go to what? Go to the general principle. And what is the general principle? The commercial accounting principle. So you tell me now, students, whether this loss can that be considered to be this loss, can that be considered to be a trading loss? And the answer is no. It has to do with plant and machinery. Second, can you therefore say this loss has to, or this loss is in the nature of a loss which is incurred in a normal course of business? Is it a loss or an item which is incurred in the normal course of business? Again, the answer has to be no. You cannot say this to be an item which is incurred in the normal course of business, and therefore this particular item will not be allowed as deduction. This particular item will not be allowed as deduction because it is neither a trading loss nor it is a loss which is incurred in the normal course of business, and hence it is a capital loss. So how does it becomes capital loss? Everyone says, and I am telling you, those students who will be just now appearing in November 20, ask them, it is so easy to say it is a capital loss. Prove it, it's a capital loss. What constitute a capital loss, students? What constitute a capital loss? Start probing to get the answer of this such a critical factor. What constitute a capital loss? What do you mean by the term capital loss? Nobody will be in a position to successfully answer you this. So capital loss is a loss which is neither a trading loss nor a loss which is incurred in the normal course of business, and therefore in the nature of a capital loss, and hence as per the commercial accounting principle, such capital items is not allowed as deduction in determining the profit and gains. As per the cap, that is commercial accounting principle. Now, having said that, please pay attention. Having said that, still you may have to refer the statutory provision. Even though this loss may not be allowed as a deduction as per the commercial accounting principle, still you may have to refer what? The statutory provision of section 28 to section 43D. Can you tell me why is it that you have to refer the statutory provision under section 28 to 43D? You have to refer the statutory provision to check out, is there any provision in that section list which specifically allows the deduction of such item which otherwise as per the commercial accounting principle is not allowed. You have to go through this list from 28 to 43D to determine, is there any item, is there any section which specifically allows such loss which otherwise is not allowed, as per the commercial accounting principle. Like for example, students, if you remember, your very favorite section of PGP was 35AD, one of the favorite section, 35AD. And as for 35AD was concerned, what it used to say? The deduction was of the capital expenditure incurred in relation to specified business. A capex which is incurred in respect of a specified business is the deduction that used to get for section 35AD. Why? That they have to carve out a specific section in 35AD because they knew that this cannot be covered ordinarily under the normal commercial accounting principle, and that was the reason why there was a necessity to specifically carve out the deduction under 35AD. So again I am repeating, students, please be very careful. If a particular item is not allowed as per the cap, still you may have to refer the statutory provision. For what purpose? To check where if that particular item is specifically allowed as deduction. At the same time, if a particular item, please be careful, if a particular item is allowed as deduction, as per the cap, still you may have to refer what? Section 28 to section 43D to determine what? Whether is there any specific section which will disallow that item which otherwise is allowed as per the cap. Is there any specific section which will disallow that particular item which is otherwise allowed as per the cap? This is what primarily you have to do. And that exactly how, students, it has to be considered. So please take a note of this particular part. In the above case, the deduction of the loss of plant and machinery by fire is neither a trading loss nor a loss incurred in the normal course nor a loss incurred in the normal course of business. Therefore, being a capital loss, it is not allowed. As per the commercial accounting principle. Being a capital loss, it is not allowed as per the commercial accounting principle. Fine, students. So in this context, students, now you will write that particular sentence or a statement. Please use another color pen to write this important sentence or the statement. Therefore, in respect of an item which is allowed as per cap, the statutory provisions under the head PGBP in the bracket, right, or IFOs shall still be referred to determine whether any specific section disallows its deduction. Therefore, in respect of an item which is allowed as per cap, the statutory provisions under the head PGBP or IFOs shall still be referred to determine whether any specific section disallows its deduction. Next line. Conversely put, an item which is not allowed as deduction as per the cap, comma, in respect of such item, in respect of such item, the statutory provision shall still be referred in order to determine what, students? In order to determine whether the item is specifically allowed as a deduction. Specifically allowed as deduction under any section. In the bracket, students, you can write as an example. Example is 35. Fine, students. Fine, students. Now, students, in this context, again, let's be very careful what we have discussed so far. Just pay attention to this one. That as far as the head PGBP and as far as the head PGP and IFOS is concerned, and versus the head house property and capital gain is concerned, what we have discussed, house property and capital gain is concerned, these two heads are a head relating to statutory adjustment on a base amount. And what is the base amount? We already know. These two heads are all about the statutory adjustment to the base amount, whereas these two heads are a full-fledged computational heads of income. Just keep this particular point in mind. Fine, you can just write if you want primary, so it's just to ensure that this confusion does not exist. This is just a note kind of a thing. The head PGBP and IFOS involves statutory statutory adjustment to a base amount determined as per cap. Whereas the head, clear and downward adjustment rules, the head HP and CG is a full-fledged HP and CG provides for full-fledged computational mechanism full stop. It is a self code by itself, unlike the other two heads, in the bracket PGP and IFOs, which only provides for adjustments to the base amount, which only provides adjustment to the base amount. Fine, students. Keep this perspective in mind, students, carefully, so that in our next class we shall then introduce what? The concept of the ICDS. ICDS, students, is what we will introduce. What ICDS plays a role. We will in fact start dealing with the ICDS. Next class, students, would be through the encrypted mode. Ensure that all your activations are done, so that the next class that you all view would all be in encrypted mode. Okay, students, see you then. You will just check your the Gmail account, wherein we give all the details about the procedure to be followed for the activation and all. Just follow the same. The details which has been given, the relevant WhatsApp number has also been given. You can just communicate over there and get your particular account activated, where all the further lectures will be given to you. Okay, see you then.